What's up, guys? This morning was Easter Sunday. Some of you guys joined us on campus, some of you guys joined us online, but we as youth team wanted to create something because we are not at watch parties tonight, just in case you guys wanted to jump on or had friends that were wanting to jump on and see what's going on with Rolling Hills Youth this week. As we were preparing for this, I was thinking through some of my Easter memories and some things that happened in my life on Easter Sundays throughout the last several decades. And I think the most notable moment that happened in my life that was funny on an Easter Sunday was one of the years where an expectation did not meet up with the reality of the moment. We as a family used to celebrate Easter by waking up, we'd see the Easter baskets. Of course, we would get so excited, but it was really honestly just a huge tease because then we'd go to church, which is the real reason for Easter, right? And then we'd get back from church and we would get to just dig into these Easter baskets. We'd get to eat all the candy. We'd go searching for eggs all over the house and the yard. And this year in particular, it was much different. That's what I was expecting. But when we got back from church, we walked downstairs to where the Easter baskets were so delicately placed before church, and they were empty. Like no grass, no Cadbury cream eggs, no jelly beans, no Easter peeps, nothing. And then we looked over and we saw our dog, Coco, just laying there in bloated pain, like looked like miserable, right? And sure enough, we let Coco outside, and I kid you not, for the next week, Coco was like vomiting and had the runs, and we found all the remnants to our Easter baskets in our yard later on that week. So needless to say, Coco ruined Easter that year. Coco absolutely destroyed my expectation of what Easter was gonna look like, because the reality of what happened was she enjoyed my sister and my Easter baskets. But that's what we want to talk about today. And I think that's like really in the story of Easter is this difference between the expectation of what was thought was going to happen and the reality of what did happen and what it caused.
Yeah. So for you guys, we want to ask, have you had a moment where you had this expectation, but then the reality of it was much different than you had expected it to be?
So a few years ago, I was going to Disneyland with my best friend, and we get there and we're like so excited. We're like, yeah. And so we get there, and then there's like, we look and there's like this big wall in front of the castle with a printout like picture, and we're like,
oh my gosh.
What? What is this? What the heck? And so we're like so disappointed. We're like, we can't like go in it or take a picture. We're like, dang, this is sad.
Yeah, you could have like at home printed out a picture of the castle and took a selfie in front of it, right?
Was it that they were constructing the castle?
Like construction or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, that's
Sad
a horrible
times.
Disneyland trip. Yeah.
That's very disappointing.
For me, it was when I was in 8th grade and I was expecting to be able to go to the high school I had grown up in. It was a K through 12 school. I thought I was going to get to go there with all my friends. I was going to be able to win all these awards, be one of the popular kids. And then they told me the high school was going to shut down and I was going to end up going from this school at the top and be homeschooled basically. And so that was like a huge like hit when that happened for me.
Wow.
Yeah, that's hard.
When COVID was first starting, my school actually said, oh, we're just going on a week break, so don't take stuff from your locker, leave all your books here, like we're gonna come back, don't worry about it. So naturally, I thought that, and I even posted like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited for our break, like I don't know what I'm gonna do this week. And then obviously that turned to months, and then they said, oh, your senior year will be totally normal, it'll be done by summer if everybody, does what they're supposed to, and obviously that did not happen either. So yeah, definitely a different reality from what I was thinking.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I was baptized a few months ago here, there was originally going to be like 3 other girls baptized with me, and then it turned out that they weren't going to be. And so then when I got there, I was like, oh no, the whole church is just going to be looking at me this entire time. And I was just like, that's kind of the point of baptism. So I was like, okay, maybe this won't be so bad. And then it turned out there was another girl there, and that was like, oh, phew, at least we'll kind of share the spotlight there. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, so clearly we've all experienced some sort of expectation versus reality moment in our life. So today we want to talk about the sayings that Jesus said while he was on the cross, and 3 specific ones that I think are paramount and very important for us as students and a youth ministry to look at and really dissect what do they mean and what do they mean to us individually. So the first one is, Father, forgive them. Ephraim, could you read our scripture?
Yeah. When they came to a place called Golgotha, also known as the Skull, they nailed Jesus to the cross, and the criminals were also crucified, one on his right and one on his left. Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they are doing.
So I've got down here, at the age of 33, Jesus was condemned to the death penalty. At the time, the crucifixion was the worst death. Only the worst criminals were condemned to be crucified. Yet it was even more dreadful for Jesus because unlike any other criminals, Jesus was to be nailed to the cross by his hands and feet. All of this does not even mention the humiliation he passed after carrying his own cross, which weighed 66 pounds for 3 miles, while the crowd spat in his face and threw stones. Each nail drove through his hands and feet were 6 to 8 inches long. The nails were driven into his hands, forcing Jesus to use his back muscles to support himself so that he could breathe. Both of his feet were nailed together as well, forcing him to support himself on the single nail that impaled his feet to the cross. After a few minutes before he died, Jesus stopped bleeding. He was simply pouring water from his wounds. Then a Roman soldier pierced his side with a spear, and Jesus poured out all of his blood. So what does this phrase, Father, forgive them, when we look at it in the light of that passage, Ephraim, that you read, and just knowing some of the facts of the crucifixion and what happened that day, what do you say that phrase means to you?
I feel like for me, it says that Jesus, while going through one of the most painful experiences anyone has ever experienced, he was still able to keep his priorities straight in that moment. His priorities was, I am here to help other people. I'm not here to help myself. And he was able, in that moment of extreme, excruciating pain, when most of us wouldn't be able to say anything, wouldn't be able to think straight, we'd just be cussing our head off and literally just going off. He is literally just, Father, forgive them, because his priorities were, I'm going to help these people, and I know that they don't know who I am, and it's not their fault for this.
Wow. So in 2021, in a time where so much is going on, so much is happening, what can that phrase or what can this story mean for us today as teenagers walking through what we just walked through in the last year? How do you think you can apply this principle, this thought, exactly what you said Jesus just did in your own life as you try to emulate and mirror the life of Christ?
Yeah, I think I can speak to that. I think a big thing for me is just always keeping in mind like where other people are coming from. Like there's you're going to encounter so many people who either come against you for no reason or, just act harshly for what you see as for no reason, but they could be experiencing excruciating things, back at home or just, like their own inner turmoil, especially during quarantine. We've just seen the decline of mental health. And, I think it's slowly starting to climb back up because we've, given so much attention to it. But, like, you never know like where people are at, and so they might be taking out their own hurt on you. And so just coming with the mindset of like this isn't about me. Like this hurt that you're showing isn't necessarily always about me. Of course we need to acknowledge when we're wrong, but if it's uncalled for, just coming at that with grace and being like, okay, like I'm not going to retaliate, like how Jesus just was the perfect depiction of peace and just constant calamity all the time. He was always he never got stressed. He never like freaked out. And when he did, it was only for good reason, And so, just always remembering that, we can't see everything that people are going through, and just to always be as kind as we can.
Yeah, and sometimes it's almost like our response to situations can be more telling about ourselves than
Like where we're at.
yes,
Yeah.
And instead of just like throwing the Bible at someone or telling them to believe because I believe, it's like, no, like look at the life I'm living and look at the way that I'm forgiving, and let that be a testimony and a story. What else? Anyone else feel like, hey, this is what forgiveness, this phrase, Father, forgive them, how does that hit you and how does that impact your life?
I think that means like when someone does something to you or like they sin against you, then you need to come at it from a mindset of like, when Jesus had the most worst thing that could ever happen to you happen to him, he was thinking about forgiving them, and like that was his mission, was not getting back at them. It wasn't vengeance. He wasn't thinking about what they were doing. He was thinking about forgiving them. So I think that when you're in a situation where you're like thinking about what someone did to you, you should instead think about how to forgive them and think about what Jesus did for you and mirroring that onto other people.
Yeah, that's big.
Really quickly, just one more thing I want to add to that I was just thought of was Jesus, instead of using his words to save himself, because at any moment in that entire situation, he could have called it all off. He could have been like, okay, I'm done with this. These people aren't worth it. They can go to hell, and I'm just going to go back up to heaven where I belong. But instead, he stuck it out and used his words, instead of saving himself, to forgive other people, including the criminal next to him.
Wow, that's huge.
Yeah.
One thing I also get from this is like he went through like that whole thing of being nailed on that cross, and he endured all that pain for us. So it just kind of lets us think we can endure like life wherever we're going through. We can just remember that he went through that for us, and we just have to have that mindset of he's got our back whatever we're doing. Like whatever comes at us, we will get through it, and he's gonna help us, give us the strength and just everything we need to carry on through whatever we go through. And we can just remember what he did, and he forgives all our sins through life, and we're always made new in him. And he gives us like the grace and mercy to just keep going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Natalie, I don't want to put you on the spot, but could you even speak to your thoughts on this like idea of sometimes, I don't want to make a blanket statement, but how I think sometimes we here in America can feel like, man, you know, it's hard to be a Christian. When in reality, there's other countries in the world where there's literally like underground Christianity happening because they will literally be punished by death or punished by execution because of their beliefs. And so I guess, you know, just taking what Ava said and just speaking to the fact that we need to kind of step up and step into some of God's calling in our life, whether it's hard or not, to stand for Jesus.
Yeah, I think it's funny sometimes because as I'm like listening to y'all, you know, we use these phrases of like, so, you know, like let's endure, let's, you know, do these things, and it's a lot easier said than done, right? But then you think of the context of other people in different countries who get literally like shot if they're like reading their Bible or something. So it's such a interesting predicament because we think of endurance as like, oh, I am going to like share my faith with my friend, and that's like super awkward and weird, and like I have to endure the weirdness or the awkwardness of that, when as like so and so, which is, it's not that it's not valid. That's not what I'm saying. It's still valid, but when you look at across the world, in whatever country it is, in Africa, in the Middle East, wherever it may be, endure looks much different. They're, you know, hiding to try to just spend a moment with God, or to, you know, people have pieces of the Bible. They have like pieces of it, you know, and we're like, oh, we've got this big old Bible, and dude, I throw it underneath my bed sometimes, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what's it doing there? But yeah, I think that for us, keeping that in mind, in our daily life and recognizing, oh my gosh, like we actually have such a privileged life to be able to do the things that we do, to show up here, to be at church on Easter Sunday, to have relationship with people who think like us, and also who don't think like us. All right, so we're going to move on to the second phrase that Jesus said, and it was, "Why have you forsaken me?" And Kaylin, I believe you have our scripture.
At about 3 o'clock, Jesus called out with a loud voice, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Matthew 24:46.
Yeah, so prior to this, we see, Jesus on the cross, and he's forgiving his torturers. He's assuring the thief next to him. He's taking care of his mother, but now he's forsaken, right? And God on a cross is wondering why. And what I find interesting is we have to realize that in this moment, it's not like Jesus is surprised. Like, he's not hanging on the cross being like, dude, like, what's going on? Why have you forsaken me? He's not surprised by it. He was expecting this to happen. But I think that the pain of, it says, God turned his back on him. I think the pain of that felt like it was too much to bear. Right. And so, the message itself is not about hopelessness. He's not like, God, why have you forsaken me? Like, all hope is gone. But it's about substitution. It's about how Jesus knowingly and willingly took himself and had himself put on a cross and endured what he endured for us, right? He became the substitute for us. And I think that is like, it's just amazing and astounding. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that specifically, but if you do, like, go for it.
When I think about that moment, I immediately go to that part with God turning his back on Jesus, and it was because he was taking all the sin of the world upon him. And that's it's like when we're taking a punishment, we know what's coming, we know what we're getting, and yet at the same time, we're still either going to be angry about it, and we're still might say something about it. I feel like that was almost what Jesus was going through at that moment, is he was taking all the sin of the world. He was basically just forgiving all of us at the same time. And so God was turning his back on him, and he was yelling out to God, why is this the only way?
Right. Yeah.
Or even how it says in the Bible that God cannot be in the same in the same vicinity as sin, and so I think just picturing, all of the sin being placed on his son was just so painful that he had to turn away, and that I think thinking of it like that, because Jesus was completely God and completely man, he still had, the earthly pain, and so that even just seeing that must have been just horrible, seeing anybody you love in pain is just an awful experience, but knowing that this was the only way, and being the atonement for sin is just huge.
Yeah.
For me, it also just brings me back to when God also asked Abraham to sacrifice his son Isaac, and now God is basically going through what that happened, except for he's not going to get to back out at the last moment.
Right. Yeah.
And the final phrase that we heard Jesus say on the cross was, "It is finished." Ricky, would you read the scripture?
Yeah. So 2 rebels were crucified with him, one on his right and one on his left. Those who passed by hurled insults at him, shaking their heads and saying, "You who are going to destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself. Come down from the cross if you are the Son of God." In the same way, the chief priests, the teachers of the law, and the elders mocked him. He saved others, they said, but he can't save himself. He's the King of Israel. Let him come down now from the cross. Now we will believe in him. In the same way, the rebels who were crucified with him, also heaped insults at him. From noon until 3 in the afternoon, darkness came over all the land. About 3 in the afternoon, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, my God, why have you forsaken me?" And when Jesus had cried out again in a loud voice, he said, "It is finished." With that, he bowed his head and gave up his spirit.
So this is that question that, even Ephraim, you were talking about earlier. It's like, why didn't he stop them? We know that he had the power to stop the whole situation from happening. He had the ability to change the narrative of the story. So why didn't he do that? What's your thought or your answer to that?
So for me, when I think about it, when he went through all this and he said, "It is finished," then the veil in the temple, it tore. And he was basically, when he said, "It is finished," he wasn't talking, I don't believe, about his life. He was talking about the old covenant between the Israelites and God. It was basically, it is finished. The old covenant is gone. The new covenant between God and every person, everyone on the planet was born, and everyone who has ever lived and ever will live. And I feel like he was just, at that moment, he knew, I just have to stick it out a little longer. Right. And then he said, "It is finished," and it was over.
That's good. And I think, what we see in this change over from the old covenant to the new covenant is this idea that to bring a sacrifice or to get forgiveness, you would bring an animal, you bring that sacrificial gift, and it was only good until that person who gave the gift sinned again or made another mistake, and then they would have to do that again. Whereas Jesus dying on the cross and paying our debt and being that ransom changed a lot. And so I think Jesus knew and understood that, yes, he could have pulled himself down. He could have completely, changed the situation that happened that day, but he knew what his calling was. He knew what his responsibility in that moment was for all of mankind, all of the world. What else? What other thoughts do you guys have about this thought or this phrase of "it is finished"?
I think too, like how just, back in the Old Testament, like even, women weren't allowed to have the Bible, and that actually didn't come to place for a while longer until like Martin King and everything, or Martin Luther. And I just think that, like, that's so crazy how, like, not everybody was included in that. And it was, like, only the priest who was allowed, to have the Bible and everything like that. And I think that that's another thing that Jesus was breaking down, was, like, that wall, that it really was only, like, a religion. And I feel like now it's more a relationship, we can be in constant communication with God, and it's not just the leaders who are supposed to be like that, it's all of us, and we all have that opportunity, no matter where we come from, what walk of life, we all have that opportunity to be in constant communication and constant relationship. And I was just talking to somebody about too, even like getting like advice and things like that. Like, why wouldn't we run to the one who gives us the answers? Like, why do we run to other people for advice and other people for help when he's the one who gives them the help and them the advice? And I just think that it's so beautiful that we have that opportunity every single day.
Yeah. Can I say something real fast? I think what you hit on was really interesting, and Ephraim, you did as well. But you said there was a wall, and that's essentially what the veil in the temple was. I don't know if you know this, but basically there was a place called the Holy of Holies. Like, that was the place where I think it was like 2 people could go in there. And that's where they would bring the sacrifice and meet with God. They actually had to tie like a bell to the person, because the presence of God was so powerful in that room that if they fell over, they would hear it through the bell, and they would like drag the person out. And so when they talk about the veil being torn, it's that veil in that place of the Holy of Holies that was torn, so that all people can have access to God, so that there's not just 1 or 2 people that can go into that room and access God. And I think that that's what's so powerful about the Easter story, is then it is finished, and then it says, and the veil in the temple was torn, and that created access for everyone. I think that is so powerful, and I love that you said that, because you touched on, like, even, just women or other people didn't have access to things. And I think God is the God of, like, including everyone. And I just think that that's so beautiful about the Easter story, and that you just touched on that.
And I think to go deeper into that, that makes me literally like think, man, when we as a student ministry gather for worship, whether it's at a watch party or at a United night, I know I can't place my desire and my hunger for God in someone else or push that on someone else, but it just makes me feel like, man, if these students knew like what was attainable in that moment, and the fact that we have the ability to access the presence of God, and it can be done in worship, I think that students would look at worship totally different.
Yeah.
And I think sadly in today, you know, our culture, we see it as it's a concert, and this is just like a band that is singing songs rather than a group of worship leaders who is literally helping us access the spirit and the presence of God. So my encouragement to you guys, but also to, you know, youth who are watching this video, is just knowing that the story of Easter is what really has given us that access to the presence of God in such a powerful way.
Yeah.
Kind of tying this up in a full circle moment, we started by talking about this expectation versus reality. So let's talk about the people. Let's talk about the soldiers. Let's talk about the people who wanted Jesus to be crucified. What do you think their expectation was by this happening, and what was the reality of what happened when they crucified Jesus? Any of you guys want to speak to that?
I think it's so interesting how literally the religious leaders at that time thought that Jesus' power, they came to this conclusion that it was actually from demonic spirits, you know? And so they thought that in, you know, their self-righteousness, that they were casting that out, that they were ridding the city of this demonic power, just, you know, something other than what they believed. And yet it completely like transformed into something that could, be inclusive to all people. And it was like the essence of love was shown. And just like the demonstration of God, or of Jesus, like giving his life for us, is literally the most selfless act of love. And it just completely proved them wrong. And I think that that's actually really cool, how he didn't even need to speak to that. It was through his actions and the way that he lived that, I believe that they probably came to see that a little later. And I just think that that's really cool.
Yeah.
I think for me, the people I look at first who had these crazy expectations for what this night was going to be and what it ended up turning into would be the disciples. Going from one side, you have Judas, who is thinking, okay, I'm going to go make some money. You have Peter, who is claiming, I would never leave you, Jesus, ends up betraying Jesus. And then you have the other disciples who are expecting, this is our Savior, this is the Messiah, this is God. And then watching him die and thinking, it's over. We just wasted this much time of our lives.
Yeah.
People want to kill us. They think we're heretics. They think we're crazy. And like, how hard that must have been on them for the next 3 days to be living through that. Right. And the persecution they knew that they were going to receive, like to the point where they were literally in hiding for the next 3 days until Jesus came.
Yeah. So the expectation of that versus the reality of what happened on Easter, right?
Yeah.
On Easter Sunday, which is where the power of the story and why Christianity and Jesus is so different from any other religion in the world, right? Ava, do you have something you want to add there?
Yeah, it's kind of similar to what she said. Like, they're like, okay, we're going to get rid of this bad person that we see, but actually it's like this amazing thing. It's like, bam, okay. The presence of God is in all of us, and we can feel that like peace that surpasses all, because he's like in us now. We can feel him closer than ever before, and we can just have that like deeper connection with him and know him just deeper. And it's just like this amazing reality from this expectation that was like, okay, we're getting rid of this bad person, and we're like, okay, this is going to be good, but it's actually like for them.
Yeah.
And then this is going to be better than ever before.
Yeah.
I was going to say, just to add to what Ava said, everyone thought that when they crucified Jesus, that was over. They'd gotten rid of a bad person. But what was really happening was God's action spoke louder than any words he could have used to them, because they weren't listening to him clearly. So like when he came back on the third day, that was like people saw that what they did didn't make a difference in like getting rid of him or anything. Like, he is truly God. He came back. So like, he paved the way for forgiveness and for us to have a relationship with him, where it's not just like you have to bring a sacrifice to him to talk to him and go into a holy temple where you have to have all these rules and stuff to get in to speak with God. You can be anywhere. You don't have to use your words. You can speak in your heart to God, and he will listen and he will hear you. And I think that's just so amazing, how we have a God that loves us so much and is always there to listen. He doesn't take us sleep. He doesn't sleep. He's always there for us every time.
Yeah.
So.
That's so cool. Yeah, I mean, I think to summarize what I hear you guys saying is that this group of people decided, hey, we're going to end this guy's life and his life will be over. We're going to put an end to this like movement or this guy's influence. And the reality was they actually poured fuel on it. They poured gas on it. And what they thought was ending someone's influence actually gave him the platform on Easter Sunday, when he did not allow death to take him out, when he defeated death in the grave. It gave him the platform, the megaphone, the ultimate social media account to basically spread this amazing news through the disciples who saw him, who touched him, who put their hand through the wounds in his hand. And so, man, what an ultimate example of expectation versus reality. And so I think in closing today, I just would encourage you guys and any of the students who are watching this video today to look at our lives, look at the things that we may put so much value in and so much expectation towards, and realize reality is those things may not give you the value that you think it does.
Yeah.
And the relationships or the friendships or the social media or the influence or whatever those things may perceive to be an expected outcome of like happiness may actually bring a different reality.
Yeah.
And my hope and my goal and our hope as a ministry is just that students would see and realize that Jesus really is the answer, and he's really the way to that happiness.
Yeah.
So thank you guys for joining us today.